We meet again. I'm your host, Dane Terrell, and welcome to Just Words. For this week, we're going to pick up with the Black Viking, the second book review that is to the Black Viking. Now, in the first episode of the Black Viking, the first book review, I should say, we kind of expounded in depth about the overall detail, the storyline. For this version, for this episode, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the characters, the main characters, that is, going into detail about who they are, what they are. So that's what we're going to focus on, and we're going to get right into it right now. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on King Dane because I think I really went into great detail about him in the first book review. But for those who don't know, King Dane is the son of King Arn, the fiercest and greatest of all the Viking kings, the direct descendant of Odin himself through the bloodline, which says a whole bunch. And we're going to talk a little bit more about King Dane's ancestry with Odin after I get done speaking about his Kush ancestry through his mother Kasaka. Now, Kasaka, in her natural form, is a celestial goddess. She's not human. She took the human form of a high Kush priestess just for this moment, to mate with King Arn to produce the Great One being King Dane, the one who was prophesied by the supreme gods to put an end to the timeless feud of his father gods, Odin and Aman. Now, Dane's connection with Odin is obvious through King Arn. If King Arn is a descendant of Odin, then Dane himself has to be a descendant of Odin. But in the midst of the chaos between Odin and Aman just going berserk, destroying the world, the supreme gods confiscated the Odin blade and Aman's staff, the symbols of both these gods, earth gods' strengths. To put it in to this war, this feud that's killed a wanton amount that's even incalculable by the gods, Dane has to win the Odin blade, conquering those specific trials, and Dane has to win Amon's staff, conquering those trials as well. So unfortunately, we don't see Dane get directly to those trials. I shouldn't say unfortunately. King Dane does not grapple with those specific trials in the first book, The Trials of King Dane. The Trials of King Dane is laying down the foundation of why King Dane came to be, the state of the world, the Kush, the beginning of learning about the Kush, because there's a whole lot more to the Kush. But because the first book is really centered mostly in Namanzia, you learn a lot about the Vikings and the main Viking characters. But believe me, you're going to learn about the Kush, Cushmanlin, Moreau in the second book, the second installment to the Black Viking, which is called Divinity Unleashed. Okay? So we talked about Arn, we talked about Dane, we talked about Kasaka. An important character that we spoke a lot about but never really got into detail was Matthias. Matthias was not only King Arn's master general, his right-hand man, but he became the right-hand man and the second father in a lot of ways to King Dane. Now, for those who don't know, Matthias, well, first of all, before I get into Matthias, Normanzia, there's the kingdom of Normanzia, which is now presided and ruled over by King Dane. But within Normanzia, there's a series of lordships. There's a noble class that goes on there. Matthias himself is not only a lord, but he's a high lord. But because Matthias wanted to serve King Arn, they weren't blood brothers, but they were everything as much as brothers. He kind of left behind his lordship duties to serve with King Arn, and really his younger brother, Darius, Lord Darius, took on the full mantle of lordship. Darius, you're going to learn about him through Divinity Unleashed, the second installment of the Black Vikings. So understand right now, plant that seed in your mind that Lord Darius is Matthias' brother, who's going to play a pivotal role in the Black Viking as well. In addition to serving King Arn and then King Dane, Matthias himself has a family. His wife is Lily, and his son Churchin. Matthias loves his family to death. This is not where I'm going with this. But the need for Matthias to be a soldier was so strong that it took priority and it took precedence over a lot of things. And he depended on Lily. He depended on Churchin a whole lot in his absence to handle things. And in a lot of ways, as Matthias has gotten older, he's getting up through the years, and he's still strong. This is a guy you don't want to mess with. I'm not saying he's feeble. Guilty feelings start to set on his mind, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out when you read the book. That story is told in the trials of King Dane, Matthias's backstory with Lily and Churchin. And I want to tell you so bad, but I told you before, like in the first episode, I'm not here to give away spoilers, okay? I can't do that. You guys need to stop playing games. You need to buy this book. You need to read this. You need to tell your friends about it. You need to post about it. Then we can get into all the details there. Right now, we're going to take a break. So grab a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, something nice to eat, some crackers, because Just Words is coming right back. So with Matthias, you need to keep in mind his younger brother, Darius, full lord in the Isle of Gormak. He has a family, Lily and Churchin. There's also another important character to keep in mind. He seems very innocuous. In fact, he's a very young boy who goes by the name of Eban. Eban was so in love with Pantheon. Pantheon is the prized horse of King Dane. He was bred exclusively for King Dane to ride. He doesn't listen to anybody but King Dane except for Matthias, and he's very, very partial, very, very loving to Eban as well. Outside of that, Pantheon, he doesn't respect anybody. And Eban drew a very close friendship with Pantheon. What's interesting about Eban is you're going to learn that he's very quiet. In fact, he doesn't speak for a long, long, long time. And there's a lot of reasons why that is, which again, you have to read the book to figure out why that is. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but Eban is a very, very special character, even though he's a boy. Okay, now I think it's time to talk about Ragnar, the second prince, the younger brother to King Dane. Now, in defense of Ragnar, when you first meet him, you kind of don't know what to make of him. He's very fierce. In the book, he grew up to be a very fierce warrior, a very proud, strong warrior, but that wasn't always the case. In fact, when Ragnar was born, he was very sickly, and there were doubts as to whether or not that was actually King Arn's son, and that took a toll on Ragnar growing up, and it kind of warped him. It damaged him psychologically. It shaped him in a lot of ways to be the man that he eventually grew up to be. He grew up to be a physically, magnificent man. Now, his mother is Gudrid. Gudrid's connection to King Arn is when King Arn took Dane home when he was a baby. He needed someone to be Prince Dane's wet nurse, and that was Gudrid. And so for the first year of Prince Dane's life, Gudrid nursed Dane, took care of him, rocked him to sleep, fed him. But then when the year was over, she grew so attached to Prince Dane that you could tell it was going to be a bad breakup that Matthias tried to warn her about. See, Matthias is that central character. You can't really go too far in the Black Viking, at least from the Manzia standpoint, without always bringing in Matthias, because Matthias was always that voice of reason, that steady hand, the glue in a lot of ways that kept everything together. But even more detrimental to Gudrid was she fell in love with King Arn, which is not hard to do. He was the fiercest warrior of his time, the direct descendant of Odin, Arn the Fearless. he was called. So it's quite understandable why she would fall in love with him, and especially since Arn was very lonely at that point. His whole world at that time was all about Prince Dane. Nothing else mattered to him, I should say. Without giving away any details, Gudrid overstepped, and she wound up getting impregnated by King Arn, but she was still cast away nonetheless. And bitterness began to set in, rage began to set in, and so what was once a nice, nurturing woman, I'm speaking about Gudrid now, kind of twisted her too. She eventually gives birth to Ragnar, who was just born very sickly. He was born very weak, and life for him was a struggle. Because Gudrid grew so attached to Prince Dane and had a lot of feelings for Arn, she kind of threw that on Ragnar. So it was tough enough for Ragnar growing up sickly. He was always sick, always in bed. And so Ragnar not only was kind of denied his rightful princeship from his father's side, his mom didn't love him like she should have. And this bitterness and this rage just really unhinged Ragnar as a young child. Guys, I can't believe it. I could keep talking about the Black Viking. I thought I was going to get through. I thought I was going to be able to talk about all the characters, the central characters in the first book, but it just goes to show you just how magnificent and imaginative and how broad the world of the Black Viking is, that we're going to have to try to conclude this with the third book review to the Black Viking, because I want to give all these characters their full weight. I don't want to do a rush job. That's not fair to Silverwing, and Silverwing deserves tremendous credit again for putting forth all these high-profile, detailed characters, fleshing them out from the original screenplay that was written. And so we're going to try to wrap up the Black Viking in the third book review. I'm going to try to put that out for you next week. So until then, I'm your host, Dane Terrell. Thank you for dropping by to Just Words. Catch you next time.